My husband kissed me goodbye to fly away for business. 48 hours later, I saw his name on the VIP list of the luxury cruise ship I was managing, booked in a high-end suite with his young mistress who was live streaming and showing off their wealthy escape. When they stepped onto the gangway, he froze the second he saw me standing there in uniform. I smiled professionally. Welcome aboard. In that moment, he understood the ship had just left the port, but his life had already sunk. So glad to have you with us. Quick question. What city or country are you watching from? I'd love to connect in the comments. Also, please understand this story uses fictionalized elements for educational entertainment. Any likeness to specific people or places is unintended, but the message I'm conveying is intended to help you. There are mornings you remember not because something happened, but because you later realize everything was already ending. Wednesday, December 4th, 7 o'clock in the morning. The 28th floor of a glass building overlooking Biscayne Bay, where the water catches the early light and turns the whole city gold for about 20 minutes before the heat sets in and burns it all away. That was our home. Mine and Ryan's. For years of mortgage payments, furniture arguments, and the kind of quiet routines that make a life feel solid until it isn't. My name is Natalie Harmon. I've worked for Azure Crown Cruises for 6 years, most recently as luxury concierge manager, the person responsible for making sure that guests paying thousands of dollars a night feel like the world was built specifically for them. I'm good at reading people. I notice things. Small things. The way someone holds a wine glass tells you more about their anxiety than any conversation ever could. The pause before an answer. The smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. I noticed all of it. I just didn't always want to know what it meant. Ryan Harmon was the kind of man who looked like success before he even opened his mouth. 41 years old. Broad shoulders. The kind of jaw that photographs well. He'd built his real estate development company from a 2-person office in Coral Gables into a $12 million operation in less than a decade. People respected him. Women noticed him. And for 4 years, he came home to me. That Wednesday morning looked exactly like every other morning of our marriage. And that was the problem. I was at the kitchen counter pressing my Azure Crown uniform. The crisp white blouse. The navy blazer with the small gold anchor on the lapel. When Ryan walked in adjusting his cufflinks. He was dressed for travel. Dark suit. Carry-on by the door. The particular focused energy he always had before a business trip. I didn't say anything about my own assignment yet. I'd been sitting on the news for 2 days turning it over like something precious. My first international sailing. The Caribbean route on the Celestial Horizon. Azure Crown's flagship vessel. The most prestigious posting in the company. I wanted to tell him over dinner when he got back. I wanted to see his face light up. I wanted that moment. So, I, snorts, kept my mouth shut and handed him a cup of coffee instead. You're packed early, I said. Early flight. He took the coffee without looking up from his phone. Seattle traffic is a nightmare even from the airport. Better to give myself time. I watched him scroll through something on his screen. Thumb moving fast. He tilted the phone slightly. Barely. The kind of adjustment you'd never notice unless you'd been paying attention for 4 years. I noticed. Which hotel this time? I asked. The Marriott on 5th. No hesitation. Not even a breath. Same as last time. That was the thing about Ryan. He lied the way other people breathe. Smoothly. Automatically. Without any visible effort. If I hadn't known him so well, I would have believed every word. I almost believed it anyway. I'll be away. Too. I said. New assignment. That got his attention. He looked up from his phone. And for a moment, he was just my husband again. Curious. A little warm. The version of him I had fallen for at a rooftop bar in Wynwood 4.5 years ago. Oh. Yeah? Somewhere nice. I'll tell you when you get back. I smiled. It's a surprise. Something moved across his face then. I've thought about it 100 times since. It wasn't guilt. Exactly. More like a flicker of something uncomfortable that he pushed back down before it could show. He crossed the kitchen, pressed his lips to my forehead. Warm. Familiar. The kiss of a man who had done it 10 000 times and expected to do it 10,000 more. Can't wait, he said. He picked up his carry-on, rolled it toward the door, and stepped into the elevator without looking back. The doors closed. The hum of the cable faded, and I stood in the kitchen with my uniform half-pressed and a cup of coffee going cold on the counter, staring at the space where he'd been. Can't wait. For years of marriage, that was the last thing he said to me in our home. I set the iron down and walked to the window. 28 floors below, Biscayne Bay was doing that thing it does in early December, glittering like someone had scattered a fistful of broken glass across the surface. Beautiful in a way that almost hurts to look at. A cruise ship was moving slowly through the channel heading south toward open water. White hull, clean lines, gone before I could read the name. I pressed my palm flat against the glass. Something was wrong. It had been wrong for months, collecting in the corners of our life like dust you keep meaning to clean but never do. The phone calls he took in the garage, the text messages that disappeared, the weekend trip to Charlotte in October that produced no client, no contract, no story that held together under even the lightest pressure. I had filed all of it away under the heading of things I wasn't ready to look at directly. But that morning, standing at the window while his elevator reached the lobby 28 floors below, I looked, and I knew. I didn't have proof yet. I didn't have a name or a face or a single concrete fact I could point to and say, there, that's the thing that broke us. But I knew the way you know a storm is coming before the sky changes color. Something in the pressure of the air. Something in the quality of the silence he left behind. I finished pressing my uniform. I hung it carefully in the garment bag. I drank the cold coffee standing up because that's the kind of morning it was. What I didn't tell him was that my surprise wasn't just a new assignment. It was the beginning of the end. And he would find that out in a way that neither of us could have imagined. 2 hours after Ryan drove away, my phone rang. And for a few minutes, just a few, I let myself be completely, purely happy. Director Caldwell's assistant patched me through at 9:58, which told me something right away. Patricia Caldwell did not make personal calls before 10 o'clock. She was 62 years old, ran Azure Crown's Miami operations with the precision of someone who had once managed a 4-star hotel through a Category 4 hurricane. And she did not waste time on pleasantries. When her name showed up on your caller ID before the hour, it meant something. Natalie. Her voice had that particular quality. Warm but clipped. Like a compliment delivered on a deadline. I have your next assignment. She didn't build to it. That was Patricia Caldwell's way. Celestial Horizon. Caribbean Circuit. 7 nights departing Friday at 6 a.m. You're the luxury concierge manager for the full sailing. I sat down. I hadn't been planning to sit down. But my legs made the decision without consulting me. The Celestial Horizon was Azure Crown's flagship. 3,000 passengers, 14 decks, and the kind of reputation that took 20 years and a lot of very demanding wealthy people to build. The Caribbean Circuit was the crown jewel of the winter schedule. Premium guests, first class everything, the kind of posting that junior staff mentioned in hushed voices, and senior staff quietly competed for. I had been working toward this for 6 years. 6 years of domestic roots and missed birthdays and holidays spent at sea while other people's families gathered around other people's tables. 6 years of learning the difference between a guest who wanted to be left alone and one who needed to be approached before they realized they were unhappy. 6 years of solving problems that guests didn't know they had yet. The medication left at the hotel. The anniversary dinner that needed a private table and a violinist by 8 o'clock. The widow in Suite 304 who ordered room service every night because she couldn't face the dining room alone. I did all of it without complaint. I did it because I was good at it. And because I believed that if you showed up fully and consistently enough, eventually someone would notice. Patricia Caldwell had noticed. Don't be late, she said and hung up. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 3 full minutes doing absolutely nothing. Then I called Camille. Camille Torres had been my closest friend since we were both 24 and working the same domestic route out of Port Everglades. splitting a studio apartment in Fort Lauderdale and surviving on Cuban food and whatever was left over from the ship's crew meals. She was now the head bartender aboard the Celestial Horizon. A fact that made the whole thing feel in that moment like the universe had arranged something specifically for us. She picked up on the second ring. Nat. Her voice came through the speaker like a small explosion. You got it. I got it. Oh my god. Oh my god. We are going to be on the same ship for 7 days. Do you understand what this means? This is going to be absolutely Camille. Right. Sorry. Professional excitement only. A beat. But seriously. Nat. This is huge. This is everything you worked for. I know. I was smiling so hard my face hurt. I haven't told Ryan yet. I want to surprise him when he gets back from Seattle. A pause. Brief. But there. Right. Camille said. Her voice had shifted just slightly the way a room feels different when a cloud passes in front of the sun. When he gets back. Another pause. Hey. Just take care of yourself out there. Okay. Take care of myself. Camille. I'm going to the Caribbean. I know. I just mean, she stopped. Nothing. Forget it. I'm proud of you. What were you going to say? I said forget it. Her voice was bright again. But the kind of bright that's trying a little too hard. Go celebrate. Have a glass of wine. You earned it. I filed that pause away without examining it too closely. I was good at that. Back at the office, Patricia Caldwell's assistant had already sent over the preliminary materials for the sailing crew briefings, special requests, dietary restrictions, and the VIP passenger manifest. 43 pages. I made myself a fresh coffee and settled in at my desk. The guest list for the Premier Suites alone ran 4 pages. Old money, new money, tech money. The kind of retired executives who had run out of things to do with their time and had decided that luxury travel was a reasonable substitute for purpose. I knew how to read these profiles. I knew what the notes in the margin meant. Prefers morning service. No fresh flowers allergy. Champagne on arrival always Veuve. I was on page 6 when the coffee was still warm. I turned to page 7 and my hand stopped moving. I read the line once. Then again. Then a third time. Very slowly. The way you reread something when your brain is refusing to process what your eyes are clearly seeing. The name sat there in clean black type. Perfectly ordinary. The same font as every other entry on every other page. Ryan Harmon. Suite 1201. VIP Premier. Accompanied by Jade Calloway. I set the papers down on my desk. The office had gone quiet around me. Most of the afternoon staff had already headed out and the fluorescent hum of the overhead lights felt suddenly very loud. My coffee was going cold. I didn't touch it. Jade Calloway. I didn't know that name. I had never heard Ryan mention it. I pulled out my phone and typed it in with fingers that had decided, without my permission, to start shaking. 3 million followers. Travel content. Luxury lifestyle. 26 years old. Based in Miami. I scrolled. And then I found it a story she'd posted 3 weeks ago and since deleted. But the internet has a long memory and screenshot culture is thorough. A restaurant table. Candlelight. A man's hand resting on the white tablecloth. A hand wearing a wedding ring I had chosen at a jeweler on Lincoln Road 4 years ago. Page 7. I had almost missed it. But there it was. A name I knew better than my own and next to it a name I had never seen before. The office emptied around me. My coffee went cold and I just sat there reading the same 2 names over and over. Ryan Harmon. Suite 1201. VIP Premier. Accompanied by Jade Calloway. I typed the name into my phone with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The search results loaded in under 2 seconds. 26 years old. Miami-based. 3 million followers across her platforms. Travel content. Luxury lifestyle. The kind of account where every photo looks like it was taken by someone who gets paid to make ordinary moments look extraordinary. She did brand deals with hotels in Santorini and charter companies in the Maldives. She had the kind of face that cameras loved. Open. Bright. Effortlessly pretty in a way that didn't look like it required much effort at all. I scrolled without blinking. 3 weeks ago she had posted a story since deleted. But someone had screenshotted it before it disappeared because someone always does. A dinner table. White linen. Candlelight catching the rim of a wine glass. And a man's hand resting on the tablecloth. Relaxed and unhurried the way you hold your hand when you're somewhere you feel completely comfortable. The ring on that hand was a brushed platinum band slightly wider than standard with a small beveled edge on the inner side. I knew exactly what the inside of that ring said because I had stood at a jeweler's counter on Lincoln Road and watched them engrave it myself. Always. R+N. I put my phone face down on the desk. The office had gone quiet in the way offices do late on a Wednesday afternoon. The hvac cycling down the distant sound of someone's heels in the hallway fading away. The particular stillness that settles in when the workday is technically over. But you haven't been able to make yourself leave. The overhead lights were on their evening setting. Amber warm. The kind of light that's supposed to feel cozy. But just made the room feel smaller. I thought about the last 3 months. The phone calls he took in the garage door pulled half shut. Voice too low to carry. I had told myself it was a difficult client. Ryan had difficult clients. That was true enough that I let it explain the other things. The texts that disappeared before I could read them over his shoulder. Not that I was trying to read them. I was just there. Just present. Just his wife standing 3 feet away in our own kitchen. The trip to Charlotte in October. He'd come back without a single receipt. Not even a gas station coffee. Which should have struck me as strange because Ryan Harmon kept records of everything. His tax returns were organized by quarter. His filing cabinet had color-coded tabs. A man like that doesn't misplace receipts. A man like that doesn't have receipts to misplace. I had filed all of it away under the category of things I wasn't ready to look at. I had been a very efficient filer. I picked up my phone again and went back to the manifest. Page 12. I found him on page 12. William R. Foster. Bill Foster. As Ryan called him. The CEO of Foster Group. The single largest development partner Ryan's company had ever worked with. Snorts, an $8 million contract renewed annually. Ryan had mentioned Bill's name more times than I could count in passing over dinner. Always with a particular careful respect that meant the relationship mattered. He was listed as an Azure Crown Platinum member. Annual December sailing. I remembered distantly Ryan mentioning it once. Something about how Bill had a tradition every Christmas. The Caribbean circuit with his wife Margaret. I had stored the information without meaning to. The way you store 1,000 small details about the people in your life without ever knowing which ones will turn out to matter. I turned another page. Victor Harmon. Suite 614. Standard Ocean View. Ryan's father. 65 years old. Retired from 30 years in commercial insurance. The kind of man who still held doors open for strangers and sent handwritten thank you notes. He and Eleanor. Ryan's mother. A retired school principal with a laugh that filled whatever room she was in. Had been married 40 years this December. Ryan had mentioned they were planning something to celebrate. Though he'd been vague on the details. Apparently. The details were a Caribbean cruise. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. Ryan. Jade. Bill Foster. Victor and Eleanor. All on the same ship. All sailing out of Miami on Friday morning. All completely unaware of each other's presence or of mine. I had not arranged a single piece of this. I want to be clear about that because it matters. I did not engineer this situation. I was not running some elaborate plan. I was a woman who had just been handed the best professional assignment of her career and had discovered in the same afternoon that her husband had booked the same sailing with someone who was not his wife. Everything else was coincidence. The kind of coincidence that makes you wonder if the universe has a sense of irony. I called Camille back. She picked up on the first ring, which told me she had been waiting. Camille. You knew. A long silence. The kind that confirms everything. Nat. How long? 3 weeks. Her voice was quiet. Careful. I saw them at the Venetian bar. I didn't know how to tell you. 3 weeks. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was nothing. I didn't want to. Bill Foster is on the manifest. I said. My voice came out flat and even, which surprised me. Ryan's business partner. Platinum member. Annual December sailing. Ryan's. She stopped. Did you know he'd be on board? Ryan mentioned it once. Years ago. I didn't plan for it. Camille. I didn't plan for any of this. Not Bill. Not Victor. Not any of it. Victor is on the ship. 2. Suite 614. He and Eleanor. 40th anniversary. A beat of silence. Nat. What are you going to do? Don't call Ryan. I said. Don't say anything to anyone. What are you? I'm going to do my job. I hung up before she could answer. I sat alone in the amberlit office for a long time after that. The manifest open on my desk to page 7. The HVAC ticking quietly in the walls. I had 48 hours. I hadn't planned for any of this. Not Bill. Not Victor. Not a single piece of it. Life had made its own arrangements. And I intended to be ready. Most people fall apart when they find out. I understand that. Part of me wanted to fall apart, too. But somewhere between page 7 and the cold coffee on my desk, something shifted. And I made a phone call. Diana Walsh had been a family law attorney in Miami for 19 years. She had a reputation for being methodical, unsentimental, and ruthlessly effective. The kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted the job done cleanly, without drama, without the kind of prolonged courtroom theater that only serves to make everyone poorer and more exhausted. A colleague at Azure Crown had used her 3 years ago during a divorce that could have turned ugly. It didn't. I had kept her number in my contacts ever since. Filed under a category I told myself I would never need to open. I called her at 7:45 that Wednesday evening. She answered on the third ring, which told me she was still working. Diana Walsh was always still working. Diana Walsh. This is Natalie Harmon. I said. We haven't met. I got your name from a colleague. I need to speak with you about a divorce. A brief pause. Not hesitation. Just the pause of someone shifting gears. Can you come in tonight? I was already in my car. Her office was in Brickell on the 14th floor of a building that smelled like recycled air and expensive coffee. She was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s. Silver streaks, hair pulled back precisely. Reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She shook my hand the way people shake hands when they mean it, and gestured to the chair across from her desk without preamble. I laid out everything I had. The hotel receipts. 3 months of them. Pulled from our joint credit card statements cross-referenced against dates Ryan claimed to have been somewhere else. The screenshot of the deleted story. The phone records I had requested from our shared family plan. Showing calls to an unrecognized number late evening. Sometimes past midnight. I had been thorough without knowing I was being thorough. I had been storing evidence for a case I hadn't yet decided to bring. Diana looked through everything without speaking. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. Natalie, are you absolutely certain? Once we file, I found a photo of his wedding ring on her deleted social media. 3 months of hotel receipts he doesn't know I have. I kept my voice even. I'm certain. Has he given any indication that he knows you know? None. She nodded once. Accepting this. Florida is a no-fault divorce state, which means we don't need to prove the affair to dissolve the marriage. However, documented infidelity can influence the court's decisions on asset division, particularly relevant given the marital estate you've described. She picked up a pen. I'll need to file the petition at Miami-Dade Circuit Court. After filing, Ryan will need to be formally served. A process server delivers the documents to him directly in person. He cannot be served by mail for initial divorce proceedings. He'll be on a ship, I said, sailing out of Miami Friday morning, back in port the following Friday. Diana considered this for a moment. Then we have him served at the port when the vessel docks. A process server can meet him at the gangway. It's clean. It's legal. And it's effective. She made a note. After service. Florida law requires a mandatory 20-day waiting period before any further proceedings. With the documentation you have, I'd estimate the full process at 60 to 90 days. Assuming he doesn't contest aggressively. He'll contest, I said. He's a businessman. He'll want to protect the company. Then we'll be ready for that. She looked at me steadily. I want to file Thursday evening before you sail. That gives me Wednesday night and all of Thursday to prepare the petition properly. Do it. She held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "You're very calm." "I'm very tired," I said. "There's a difference." She almost smiled. "I'll be in touch Thursday afternoon for your signature." I drove home through Brickell at 9:30. The city lit up and indifferent around me. And I did not cry in the car. I had been expecting to. I had tissues in the glove compartment specifically in case I needed them. I didn't. Thursday morning. I was back in the apartment by 8 o'clock. Ryan wasn't there. Of course. Ryan was in whatever hotel he had actually booked, under whatever name he was actually using, doing whatever it was he had been doing for the past 3 months while I worked late and came home to a quiet apartment and told myself the quiet was fine. The quiet was just what marriage looked like after the first rush of it faded. I walked through the rooms slowly. The kitchen where we had argued about whether to get a dishwasher and then laughed about arguing about a dishwasher. The living room with the rug we had carried up 4 flights of stairs in our old building because the elevator was broken. And we were 29 and thought that kind of thing was funny. The bookshelf where his architectural history books were stacked beside my cruise industry manuals in an arrangement that had always struck me as unintentionally perfect. His world and mine. Side by side. Neither one intruding on the other. The wedding photo on the shelf near the window. The two of us outside the venue in Coconut Grove, sunlight coming through the trees the way Florida light does in October. Warm and golden and completely unearned. I was laughing at something. I don't remember what. I didn't take it down. I didn't throw it. I just looked at it one last time. The woman in that photo smiling like she knew exactly how the story would go. She had no idea. Diana called at 4 o'clock Thursday afternoon. The petition had been filed with Miami-Dade Circuit Court at 3:52 p.m. A process server was engaged and standing by for Friday the 13th, when the Celestial Horizon was scheduled to dock. Ryan Harmon would be served the moment he cleared the gangway. I signed the authorization form she emailed, packed the small portable safe into the inner pocket of my luggage bag chung and GuaTNH booking screenshots. A copy of the filed petition, none of it marital property, all of it mine, and zipped the bag closed. Then I walked to the front door, turned off the lights behind me, and locked it. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not grief, not anger. Something that felt dangerously close to relief. Friday was coming, and so was everything that came with it. The Celestial Horizon was the most beautiful ship I had ever worked on. 3,000 passengers, 14 decks, and somewhere in the boarding line that morning, my husband was walking toward me. I just didn't know it yet. Port Miami at 5:30 in the morning has its own particular energy. The sky still dark at the edges, orange bleeding up from the east. The dock lights harsh and industrial against all that softness. Forklifts moving. Ground crew shouting across the concrete. The ship herself. White hull. 14 stories of glass and steel just sitting there like she owned the whole harbor. Which honestly she kind of did. Camille found me at the gangway at 6:10. Coffee in hand. Already in her bar uniform. "You sleep at all?" she asked. "Enough. Liar." She handed me the coffee. "You look good. Though. Annoyingly good. Camille." I know. Professional." She straightened. "He's on the manifest. Suite 1201. Boarded. Yet?" "Not yet." She looked at me for a long second. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure I'm not leaving my own ship." I handed her back the coffee. "Go set up your bar." She went. I turned back to the gangway. By 7:30, boarding was in full swing. The line stretched back through the terminal, families with overpacked luggage. Retired couples moving at their own pace. Business travelers who had learned to pack light and move fast. I greeted each one by name when I had it. By suite number when I didn't. Smile steady. Voice warm. Hands still. That was when I saw him. He was maybe 40 foot back in the line. And I spotted him before he spotted me. The particular set of his shoulders. The way he always stood slightly forward on his left foot. Like he was already preparing to move somewhere. Dark suit. Carry-on bag. Looking like every other successful man on his way somewhere expensive. Except next to him was a woman I recognized from 2 million social media posts and one deleted story. Jade Calloway was 26 years old, dark-haired, with the easy confidence of someone who had never walked into a room and wondered if she belonged there. She had a phone in her hand, screen facing out, and she was talking into it with the particular animated energy of someone performing for an audience. Oh my God. You guys, look at this ship. We are literally living right now. The line moved. 20 feet. 15. 10. Ryan looked up. Our eyes met. I have thought about that moment many times since. What I felt. What showed on my face. The answer to both questions is very little and nothing. I had 48 hours to prepare for this exact second, and I had used every one of them. Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Harmon. My voice came out warm and professional, the same tone I used for every guest. We're so glad to have you with us. The champagne glass on the welcome tray trembled slightly. Ryan's hand had tightened around the stem. Jade was still talking to her camera. Isn't she just gorgeous? Ryan's voice was low, controlled, but barely. Stop the live stream. What? Why? Stop it. Now. She looked at him, then at me, then back at him. Something shifted in her expression. The performance dropping away, replaced by something sharper. Who is she? Jade said quietly. Ryan said nothing. I smiled at the next passenger in line. Welcome aboard. Your suite is on deck 9. I hope you enjoy the sailing. Behind them, a few steps back, I heard a voice I recognized immediately. Victor Harmon was 65 years old, broad-shouldered, with the careful dignity of a man who had spent his whole life doing things the right way. He had been Ryan's father for 41 years and my father-in-law for 4. He had danced with me at our wedding to a Frank Sinatra song I had picked because I knew he would love it. He was standing next to Eleanor, his wife of 40 years. A small, sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and the kind of posture that only comes from decades of standing in front of classrooms. And he was looking at his son with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Eleanor. His voice was barely above a whisper. Is that Ryan? Eleanor looked. Took in Ryan. Took in Jade. Took in me. Victor. She said quietly. That is not Natalie beside him. No. His jaw tightened. It is not. I kept moving. Next passenger. Smile. Welcome. Suite number. Next. Ryan had not moved from his spot. I could feel him watching me the way you feel heat. Not seeing it. Just knowing it's there. Natalie. His voice low enough that only I could hear. I turned. Looked at him directly. Professionally. The way I would look at any passenger who needed something. Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Harmon? His mouth opened. Closed. Your suite is on deck 12. I said. The butler will be up at 9 o'clock to go over your preferences. Enjoy your sailing. I turned back to the line. Jade grabbed his arm. Ryan. What is going on? Who is not here? He said. Then where? Because she just called you Mr. Harmon. And you look like you've seen a Jade. Not here. They moved past me and onto the ship. I watched them go without watching them go. That particular skill you develop when you spend 6 years making people feel seen without making them feel observed. Behind them, Victor stepped up to the gangway. He looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said anything. There was nothing to say yet. Welcome aboard, Victor. I said. Your ocean view suite is on deck 6. I made sure you have the morning light side like you prefer. His eyes were wet. He nodded once. Sharp, deliberate, and moved past me. Eleanor touched my arm as she passed. Just briefly. Just for a second. I smiled at the next passenger in line. My hands were steady. My voice didn't waver. But somewhere behind me, I heard Ryan's sharp intake of breath as he fully understood what the next 7 days were going to look like. And I knew the 7 days had officially begun. Of all the things I had steeled myself for that morning, Victor Harmon walking toward me on the aft deck was not one of them. I had slipped out here after the last guest was settled. The gangway was clear. The embarkation band had packed up. The Miami skyline was pulling away behind us, going soft at the edges the way things do when you're leaving them for good. I wasn't performing a routine check. I just needed 60 seconds of air that didn't belong to anyone else. I heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. The footsteps of a man who had something to say and hadn't decided yet whether he should say it. I turned. Victor Harmon looked older than the last time I had seen him. Not old. Just worn down, like a man who had been handed something he hadn't asked for and was still figuring out where to put it. He stopped a few feet away. Hands loose at his sides. Natalie. He said. Victor. I kept my voice even. I didn't know you were on this sailing. Eleanor's anniversary gift. His voice was rough at the edges. 40 years. He paused. I saw it. Natalie. At the gangway. I saw all of it. I know. I said. That was all. No explanation. No softening of it. Just. I know. He looked out at the water for a moment. How long have you known? Long enough. I said. Long enough to be ready. He nodded slowly. Like that answered something he hadn't fully formed into a question yet. Snorts. Then he turned back to me. And his eyes were red at the rims. I am ashamed of my son. He said. Don't be. I said it quietly, but without hesitation. He made his own choices. That has nothing to do with you. You deserved better than Victor. I put my hand over his just briefly. Take Eleanor to dinner tonight. Order something good. 40 years is worth celebrating. Don't let this take that from her. He looked at me for a long moment. The kind of look that has whole sentences behind it that the person can't quite get out. What are you going to do? He asked finally. What I've always done. I said. My job. He nodded once. Short. Stiff pressed his lips together. And turned. I watched him walk back toward the interior doors. His shoulders carrying something that didn't belong to him and that he couldn't put down. When the door closed, I was alone. I walked to the stern rail. Behind the ship, the wake spread wide and white. Two long lines pulling apart from each other like everything you leave behind when you move forward. I let myself cry. Not loudly. Not the kind that shakes you. The kind that comes when you've been holding something carefully for a very long time and you finally set it down in a place where no one is watching. I counted the minutes on my crew watch. 7. I did not cry for Ryan. That grief was already somewhere I couldn't feel it anymore. Packed away the night. Page 7 turned cold and clear instead of devastating. I had stopped grieving Ryan before I ever stepped onto this ship. I cried for something else entirely. For the woman who had spent 4 years building a home for a man who had already decided to leave it. For every anniversary dinner I had planned with care. For every night I had stayed up waiting and told myself he was just tired. Just busy. Just stressed. He loves me. He loves me. He loves me. For every morning I had handed him coffee and believed the life we had was real. She had believed all of it. She had built all of it. And she had deserved better than to find out the truth on page 7 of a passenger manifest. I cried for her. 7 minutes. Then I stopped. I pressed the backs of my fingers to my cheekbones. Checked the mirror from my jacket pocket. The redness would fade in a few minutes. Nothing showed in the way that mattered. Clear as throat, I straightened my jacket. Picked up my clipboard. No one had seen. That was the point. That was the only time. The only crack in the surface I would allow myself on this entire voyage. 7 minutes on the aft deck of the Celestial Horizon. With nothing but open water and the wake of everything I was leaving behind. After that, the mask went back on. And it stayed on. I pushed open the interior door and stepped back into the cool conditioned air of the ship. Corridor lights. Soft music from the atrium 2 decks below. The quiet hum of 3,000 people settling into 7 days of luxury. I had 5 more days on this ship. 5 more days of smiling at the man who had broken 4 years of trust and at the woman he had brought to replace me, who still had no idea what kind of storm was already in motion around her. What I didn't know yet. What I couldn't have known standing in that corridor with dry eyes and a straight spine. Was that by the time the first day ended, the ocean would not be the only thing that had shifted. Everything was already in motion. I just had to hold the line. By noon, I had cleared the embarkation checklist. Run a full briefing with my concierge team. and handled 17 separate guest requests without once looking in the direction of Suite 12017. I had counted. The Caribbean was doing what it always does in December, pouring gold light through every window and making the whole world look like a promise. I had 4 hours before the first formal dinner service, and I needed to walk the VIP lounge on deck 5 to confirm the cocktail setup was right. Glassware lined, garnish trays fully stocked, the kind of details that don't fix themselves. I pushed open the lounge door and stopped. Bill Foster was sitting by the window. I recognized him immediately. 62 years old. Silver-haired. The kind of build that still filled out a blazer the way it did 20 years ago. He had a glass of sparkling water in front of him and a tablet open on the table, reading something with the focused calm of a man who did not take vacations so much as relocate his office to nicer surroundings. Bill Foster, CEO of Foster Group. 3 signed deals with Ryan's firm totaling just over $8 million and as Ryan had mentioned more than once over the years with something close to admiration. Bill does the Caribbean every December. Tradition. He calls it. I had seen his name on the manifest. I had noted it and filed it away. What I had not anticipated was standing 15 feet from him on the first afternoon of the voyage. I did not approach him. I moved to the far end of the lounge, clipboard in hand, and began the setup check methodically. Glassware. Ice station. Garnish tray. I was on the 3rd item on my list when the lounge door opened behind me. I didn't need to look up. I knew Ryan's footsteps by now. 4 years of mornings had made them familiar. That particular rhythm of a man who walks like he owns whatever room he's entering. Bill looked up from his tablet. Hey, Ryan Harmon. His voice carried across the lounge. Warm and surprised. He stood, hand already extended. Small world. Ryan stopped. For just a fraction of a second. The kind of pause that most people would miss. He stopped. Bill. He crossed the room and shook the offered hand. I didn't know you were on this sailing. December tradition. Bill settled back into his chair and gestured at the seat across from him, 40 years running. Sit down. Sit down. He glanced around the lounge. Where's Natalie? I heard she got promoted to this route. Remarkable woman. You must be proud. I kept my eyes on my clipboard. She's working. Ryan said. Of course she is. Bill smiled. That tracks. He picked up his water glass. So, vacation. You never struck me as a cruise man. Change of scenery. Ryan's voice had a specific quality to it now. Slightly too smooth. Slightly too measured. The voice of a man constructing a story in real time. Needed to decompress before year end. MHM. Bill set his glass down. And the young woman I saw you boarding with this morning. Silence. I made a small note on my clipboard. Garnish tray fully stocked. I did not look up. Colleague. Ryan said. Different project. Bill looked at him for a moment. Not a long moment. Just enough. The look of a man who has spent 40 years reading rooms and closing deals and knows exactly what a constructed answer sounds like. Ryan. His voice dropped. The warmth in it was still there. But underneath the warmth was something harder and considerably less forgiving. I've signed 3 contracts with you. I've referred 2 of my partners to your firm. Don't stand in front of me and lie to my face. Ryan said nothing. I'm going to assume. Bill said carefully, that whatever I think I saw this morning is none of my business. For now. He picked up his tablet again. But I'll tell you this. I've watched a lot of men make a lot of very expensive decisions on trips like this one. The ocean has a way of making things visible that the office keeps hidden. He glanced up briefly. Think about what you want the next conversation between us to look like. Ryan left 2 minutes later. I heard the door. I finished my checklist. Then I walked to the bar. Camille was restocking the top shelf. Her back to the room. Moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been doing this long enough that it required no thought. Bill Foster just had a conversation with Ryan. I said quietly. She didn't turn around. How bad? Bad enough. She set down a bottle of bourbon and finally looked at me. You want me to? Nothing. I said. Don't do anything. Just keep your eyes open tonight. She studied me for a second. You doing okay? I'm working. I said. She nodded once, the way Camille always nodded when she understood something that didn't need more words. She picked up the bourbon again and went back to the shelf. I walked out of the lounge and into the corridor. And I stood there for a moment with my clipboard against my chest and the afternoon light coming through the porthole at the end of the hall. I had not planned for Bill Foster. I had not arranged his presence on this ship. Had not coordinated his December tradition with Ryan's secret booking. I had simply noted his name on the manifest and understood that the universe occasionally has its own sense of timing. I had not planned for Victor, either. What I was beginning to understand standing in that corridor with the Caribbean light on my face was that I didn't need to plan for everything. Ryan was doing a thorough and increasingly efficient job of dismantling his own life without any assistance from me. Every person he had ever looked in the eye and called a colleague or a mentor or a father was now knowing, calculating, the way people do when they realize the man they trusted has been running a separate account all along. I had filed the paperwork. I had packed the evidence. I had done every deliberate, careful thing I needed to do before this ship left port. The rest, the Bill Fosters, the Victors, the small inevitable collisions of a closed world on open water. The rest was just the story telling itself. And the night hadn't even started yet. Camille found me at 11:30 that night in the crew lounge with a glass of sparkling water and a look on her face I had never seen before. She set her phone on the table without a word. I looked at the screen. It was a video. 15 seconds looped. The gangway that morning. Jade's camera swinging wide as she live-streamed the boarding, catching the grand staircase, the marble floors, the gold trim on the atrium railings, and then mid-pan catching me. White uniform. Clipboard. The exact moment Ryan's eyes found mine. The camera had held on that for 3 full seconds before Jade realized and moved it away. 3 seconds of me looking at my husband and his girlfriend with a smile so composed it could have been carved from something harder than bone. 15 million views. Still climbing. When did this go up? I asked. This morning. Right after boarding. Camille sat down across from me. It's been running all day. I set the phone face down on the table. What are people saying? They're calling you a queen. She said it flatly, like a fact she was still processing herself. The hashtag silence. Her answer trending in 12 countries. I looked at the ceiling. 15 million people. I said. Watched me smile at my husband and his girlfriend. 15 million people watched you handle it with more grace than anyone had the right to ask for. Camille's voice was precise. There's a difference. I picked the phone back up. I read the comments for 2 minutes. Not because I wanted to. Because I needed to know what I was dealing with. She already knew. Look at her eyes. She already knew. That smile is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. This woman is built different. Full stop. Silence. Is her answer. And it said everything. I put the phone down again. She didn't know. I said. Camille blinked. What? Jade? I kept my voice level. She didn't know he was married. Look at the comments. Look at her face in the video when she finally realizes what she filmed. I paused. She had no idea. Camille was quiet for a moment. You're defending her. I'm not defending her. I'm reading the situation. I folded my hands on the table. He lied to both of us. Camille. The only difference between us is that I have a ring to prove it. The crew lounge hummed around us. The distant vibration of the engines. The soft creak of the ship adjusting on open water. Outside the porthole, the Caribbean was ink black and unreadable. What do you think she's going to do? Camille asked. When she figures it out completely? I don't know. I thought about it. A 26-year-old woman in Suite 1201 reading 2 million comments that were slowly and systematically showing her exactly who she had boarded this ship with. The arithmetic of that realization. The way it would land piece by piece. Rather than all at once. Which was somehow worse. Whatever she does. It won't be quiet. Camille wrapped both hands around her glass. Does that complicate things for you? Everything is already filed. I said. Nothing she does changes the paperwork. That's not what I asked. I looked at her. Camille had a specific talent honed over years of listening to strangers confess things at a bar for asking the question underneath the question. No, I said finally. It doesn't complicate things for me. I'm not angry at her. I glanced at the phone still face down on the table. I feel sorry for her. She boarded a luxury cruise with a man she probably thought cared about her. She filmed a 30-second clip because that's what she does. It's her job. It's her whole life. And in 30 seconds she handed 15 million strangers the evidence that her entire situation was built on a lie. I paused. That's not nothing. You're a more generous person than I am, Camille said. I'm a practical one. I stood, picked up my water glass. She's not my problem. And she's not my enemy. Ryan is the one who made the choices. He's the one who booked 2 cabins on the same ship his wife works. He is the singular architect of everything that is currently happening. And every single consequence belongs to him. Camille was quiet. Get some sleep, I said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. I walked back to my cabin alone. The corridor was empty. Just the low hum of the engines and the occasional shift of the ship on the water. Steady and indifferent. The way the ocean always is. I lay in the dark and thought about Jade Calloway. 26 years old. 3 million followers. A whole life built on the premise that visibility was the same thing as connection. That if enough people were watching, you were never really alone. And tonight she was in a suite 4 decks above me reading comment after comment after comment from people who had no stake in her life. Each one adding another piece to a picture she hadn't asked to see. I wondered at what point the numbers stopped feeling like attention and started feeling like a verdict. I wondered if Ryan had told her anything tonight. An explanation. A reframe. Another version of a story he had clearly been writing for years. Adjusting the details to fit whatever room he was in. I thought about the way he had said colleague to Bill Foster that afternoon. Smooth and immediate. Like a reflex. The word of a man who had been compartmentalizing for so long it had stopped requiring effort. I closed my eyes. Whatever Jade decided to do with what she now knew or was in the process of knowing, one thing was certain. I had 5 more days on this ship. 5 more days of corridors and service and professionalism and passing Suite 1201 with my chin level and my face composed. And somewhere above me the night was rearranging itself. I could feel it the way you feel a weather system before the barometer moves. Not the storm itself. Just the shift in pressure. The particular stillness that means something is coming. I closed my eyes and let the ship carry me. I had been asleep for less than 2 hours when someone knocked. 4 o'clock in the morning. The ship was doing what ships do at that hour. Breathing steadily. Engines low and constant. The whole structure settling into open water like something that had made its peace with the dark. I had been deep enough under that the knocking took 3 rounds to pull me out. I sat up. Reached for my uniform jacket out of habit. Opened the door expecting Camille. It was not Camille. Jade Calloway stood in the narrow crew corridor in a silk robe and an expression that had nothing apologetic in it. She was 26 years old and looked at the kind of beautiful that had never had to work hard at anything. And she was looking at me the way people look at problems they have already decided how to solve. She had found the crew quarters. She had walked past 3 staff-only signs to get here. Mrs. Harmon, she said, I think we need to have a conversation like adults. I looked at her for a moment. The corridor light was the color of old brass. The engines hummed 6 decks below us. I did not open the door any wider. Go ahead, I said. She lifted her chin slightly. Ryan told me about you. He said the divorce was almost finalized. He said the 2 of you have been over for more than a year. Is that what he said? It was not a question. I said it the way you repeat something back when you want the other person to hear how it sounds out loud. I'm not here to fight. Jade said. I'm asking you woman to stop making this harder than it has to be. Request a transfer. Take a leave. Let things settle down. She paused. You have to know this isn't going anywhere good for you. I looked at her. Really looked the way I look at a manifest when I'm checking for discrepancies. The silk robe. The careful way she had arranged her expression into something that was meant to read as reasonable. The fact that she had walked through a restricted area of a cruise ship at 4 o'clock in the morning and was now standing in a crew corridor telling me to vacate my own life. You flew here. I said, boarded this ship. Walked through a staff-only corridor at 4 o'clock in the morning to tell me to leave my job. I'm asking you to be reasonable. Jade. I kept my voice exactly level. The kind of level that takes years to develop. Not cold because I was suppressing something cold. Because there was nothing left to suppress. I have worked for this company for 6 years. I earned this position. I will complete this contract. I paused for exactly 1 second. Is there anything I can help you with as a guest of the concierge service? Something shifted in her face. The reasonable arrangement fell away. And what was underneath it was sharper. You're really going to play it like that? I'm being professional. That's more than I can say, for he chose me. She said it like a door closing. Flat and final. You need to accept that. I looked at her for a long moment. The thing about a statement like he chose me delivered at 4 o'clock in the morning in a crew corridor to a woman who had already filed the paperwork is that it requires you to believe you are in a competition. It requires you to believe that the relevant question is who won. I had stopped asking that question 3 weeks ago in a lawyer's office on Brickell Avenue when Diana Walsh had slid a pen across a mahogany desk and I had signed my name with a hand that didn't shake. Good night, Jade, I said. I closed the door quietly. The latch caught without a sound, the way well-made things do when they close. For a moment I heard nothing. Then from the other side, "You're going to regret this." Her footsteps moved away down the corridor. Unhurried. The walk of someone who believed they had made their point. I stood with my back against the door and listened until the sound disappeared. She had not asked if I was okay. She had not flinched. Had not hesitated. Had not offered a single word that suggested she understood she was standing in the wreckage of someone else's life. She had come to my door at 4 o'clock in the morning in a silk robe with Ryan's version of events already memoized and deployed. And she had told me to move. And in that moment, I understood exactly what kind of woman she was. Not a villain. Not stupid. Not even cruel necessarily. Just someone who had been handed a story and chosen to believe it completely because believing it completely was easier than asking the questions that would unravel it. The divorce is almost finalized. They've been over for more than a year. She's making things difficult. He had given her a script. She had learned it. She had walked down here at 4 o'clock in the morning and delivered it with the confidence of someone who had never had to question the source material. I thought about that for a moment. The architecture of it. The specific precision required to look a person in the eye and hand them a version of reality so clean and self-contained that they never thought to check the edges. Ryan was good at that. I knew that better than anyone. The difference was that I had checked the edges. 3 weeks ago, I had pulled on one loose thread. A deleted photo. A timestamp that didn't match a business trip itinerary. And the whole thing had come apart in my hands. Quietly. Completely. The way things do when they were never built to hold weight in the first place. Jade hadn't pulled any threads yet. I went back to my bunk. Lay down. Looked at the ceiling of my cabin. Low institutional. The overhead lighting off. Just the faint glow from the porthole. She walked away down that corridor like she'd won something. She didn't know what was waiting for her. None of them did. Not Ryan. Not Jade. Not anyone in Suite 1201 who thought this week was going to look like a vacation. The ship moved steadily under me. 4 o'clock in the morning. 6 more hours until my shift. I closed my eyes. I was in the middle of a team briefing in the deck for conference room when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Then it buzzed again. And a third time. On the celestial horizon. A vibrating phone usually meant a guest had a last-minute change of heart about their shore excursion or a pipe had burst in a luxury suite. But this vibration felt different. Insistent. Sharp. Like a warning. I ignored it. Keeping my eyes on the junior stewards. The gala formal is in 48 hours. I said. My voice steady and professional despite the low thrum of anxiety in my chest. I want every suit pressed, every allergy list cross-referenced, and every VIP preference sheet memoized. We don't just provide service. We provide an environment where they don't even have to ask. The heavy steel door at the back of the room creaked open. Camille appeared in the doorway. She didn't step inside. She just stood there. Her face uncharacteristically pale against the bright fluorescent lights of the crew quarters. Our eyes met. And she didn't need to speak into the microphone for me to hear her. Her lips moved, mouthing 2 words that made the air in the room turn to ice. She posted. I dismissed the team with a sharp nod. They filed out whispering. Sensing the sudden shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room, Camille stepped in, closing the door behind the last steward. She didn't offer a greeting. She simply placed her phone on the mahogany table and slid it toward me. "Read it," Camille whispered, her hand trembling slightly. She didn't just post a photo. Nat. She went for the throat. I looked down. The screen was filled with a high-definition Instagram story. Jade Calloway's face, perfectly contoured even in the morning light, filled the frame. She looked distressed, her eyes artfully rimmed with a hint of red to suggest she had been crying. Behind her, the blue expanse of the Caribbean looked like a taunt. The text overlaying the video was bold and white. "Some people can't accept that a relationship is over. Harassing guests on a luxury cruise is not professional. At Azure Crown Cruises, is this how your staff treats paying customers? I don't feel safe in my own suite." In the video, Jade spoke directly to her 2.3 million followers. "I'm honestly so shaken up," she said, her voice trembling with practiced precision. "We came on this trip for peace. But instead, I'm being targeted by a staff member with a personal vendetta. It's bitter, it's unprofessional, and it's ruining our vacation. At Azure Crown, please do something about your concierge manager." I stared at the screen for a long moment, watching the view count climb in real time. The little red heart icons were exploding across the bottom of the display. "She tagged the company," Camille said, her voice rising. "She's trying to get you fired. Nat. She's turned her entire fan base against you. People are already commenting, calling for your resignation. They're calling the Miami office." I sat down, the leather chair creaking under me. I didn't change my expression. I didn't let the heat of anger rise to my face. I simply turned the phone over, placing it face down on the table. I heard you, Camille," I said quietly. You're not going to scream, cry, call your lawyer." Camille paced the small room. "She's lying. She came to your door at 4 o'clock in the morning, not the other way around." "I haven't said a single unprofessional word to her," I replied, looking at my own hands, which were perfectly still. "Not one. She's playing a game of optics. She thinks this is social media drama. She doesn't realize she's on a vessel governed by maritime law and corporate contracts." But the PR nightmare. Yee! My phone erupted again. This time, it wasn't a notification. It was an internal line. The caller ID displayed Director Caldwell. "Executive Office." Camille stopped pacing and held her breath. I picked up the receiver. "Natalie Harmon speaking," I said. "Natalie." Director Caldwell's voice was like a whip. Thin, sharp, and commanding. "I assume you are aware of the situation unfolding on social media. I have just received a formal complaint from a VIP guest in Suite 1201. She is alleging targeted harassment and claiming she feels unsafe. The Miami head office is on the other line, and they are not happy about the mentions." "I am aware," I said, leaning back. "This is a serious accusation, Natalie. On a ship this size, the reputation of our concierge service is everything. If there is even a grain of truth to her claim that you have been using your position to intimidate her." "With all due respect, Director Caldwell," I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the steel blade I needed it to be. "I have anticipated this move. I have documentation for every single interaction since the moment they cleared the gangway. I would like you to look at the security log for the crew quarters. Deck 7. Officer Morrison has the time-stamped footage from 4:32 this morning. It shows the guest from 1201 uninvited in a restricted area attempting to confront me at my private cabin." There was a silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. "I also have digital audio logs of our exchange at the boarding gate," I continued. "As per protocol for high-conflict VIP arrivals, I activated my service recorder. You will find that my tone remained strictly within company guidelines. I welcomed her. I offered assistance. I did my job." The silence stretched for 5, 10, 15 seconds. Director Caldwell was a woman who didn't tolerate mistakes, but she valued preparation above all else. "You've been thorough," She finally said, the sharpness in her voice replaced by a flicker of surprise. I've been careful. I corrected. I knew who was on that manifest before I stepped onto this ship. I haven't survived 6 years in this industry by leaving my career to chance. The complaint is noted and dismissed, Caldwell said, her tone softening significantly. I will relay this to Miami. We will issue a private statement to the guests' representatives, reminding them of the penalties for filing false reports and trespassing in crew-only areas. That should quiet her down. She paused, then added in a voice that was no longer director, but simply Caldwell. Natalie, are you holding up? This is a lot for anyone to handle, especially with the personal connection. I'll be better on Friday. I said, referring to the day we would dock in Miami. Until then, I have a ship to run. Good, because the board is watching how you handle this pressure. It's a test, Natalie. And so far, we're proud of you. Keep your head up. The line went dead. I hung up the phone and looked at Camille, who was staring at me as if I had just performed a magic trick. She dismissed it. Camille whispered. Just like that. She's a businesswoman. Camille. She hates liability more than she likes influencers. Jade thought she was throwing a stone at a glass house. She didn't realize I live in a fortress. She just complimented you, Camille said, shaking her head, while your husband is upstairs, probably helping that girl film her next Woe Is Me video. Then I better not let her down, I said, standing up and straightening my azure crown blazer. I have 400 guests who aren't trying to sue me, and they deserve my full attention. I walked to the door, but paused before opening it. I looked at Camille's phone, which was still buzzing with new comments on Jade's post. I realized then that Jade wasn't just a mistress anymore. She wasn't just a mistake Ryan had made. She was an active combatant. She was willing to burn my life to the ground to secure her own. And Ryan, he was the one who had given her the matches. I stepped out into the hallway, the conditioned air of the ship hitting my skin. I put my own phone in my pocket and looked out through a porthole at the endless deep blue of the Caribbean. Jade had made her first move. She had tried to take my livelihood. Ryan was watching from the sidelines, probably hoping I'd just disappear so he wouldn't have to deal with the guilt. But they both underestimated the ocean. And they certainly underestimated me. The situation was building toward a storm that none of us could fully control. I just didn't know yet how far Ryan was willing to push it, or if he even realized that once the waves start crashing, no one gets to stay dry. On the third day at sea, Ryan Harmon walked into my office and asked me to help fix the mess he had made. I remember thinking, even now, years later, that he still didn't understand what he'd done. He didn't see the shattered glass of our marriage. He only saw the dust on his expensive Italian shoes. The afternoon sun was pouring into the concierge manager's office, reflecting off the crystal blue Caribbean waters outside the window. It was a beautiful day for everyone on the celestial horizon, except for the man currently leaning against my doorframe. Ryan looked haggard. The sharp, polished developer who handled $12 million deals was gone, replaced by a man who hadn't shaved in 2 days, and whose eyes were bloodshot from either lack of sleep or too much expensive scotch. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him with a heavy thud. The click of the lock felt like a challenge. Natalie, we need to talk. Now, he said. His voice was raspy, stripped of its usual charm. I didn't look up. My fountain pen moved across the VIP excursion manifest for SD. Thomas with rhythmic precision. I'm working. Mr. Harmon. If you have a request regarding your dining reservations, please see the assistant at the front desk. Stop it. Nat. Stop the act, he snapped, taking 2 long strides toward my desk. He slammed his palms onto the polished wood, leaning over me. Jade posted that story. It's gone viral. Bill won't return my calls. He's avoiding me at the cigar lounge like I've got the plague. And my father. My father hasn't spoken a single word to me since we boarded on Friday. He walked right past me at breakfast today like I was a ghost. I slowly capped my pen. The silence in the room was pressurized, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. Finally, I looked up. I didn't see the man I'd spent 4 years building a life with. I saw a passenger who was violating my professional space. That's not my problem, Ryan, I said, my voice flat. Not your problem. He let out a dry, hysterical laugh. You work for this line. You're the manager here. You have the ear of the PR team. You could talk to them. Tell them the story Jade posted was a misunderstanding. You could tell Director Caldwell to put out a statement saying everything is fine between us. You could talk to Jade. Calm her down. She's spiraling because she thinks you're trying to ruin us. I stared at him, truly amazed at the depth of his delusion. You want me to talk to your mistress to help control the PR nightmare you created by bringing her onto my ship? It's about my reputation. Natalie, if Bill pulls out of the Savannah project, we lose everything. The firm. The house. The lifestyle. You're still my wife. You have a vested interest in this. I stood up slowly. The height difference didn't matter. The moral high ground gave me all the leverage I needed. I placed my hands on the desk, mimicking his stance, but with 10 times the composure. Listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice cold as an Arctic gale. You are a passenger on this vessel. I am a senior employee of Azure Crown. If you enter this office again for any reason other than legitimate concierge services, I will call Officer Morrison and have you escorted back to your suite. If you continue to harass me during my duty hours, I will have you flagged for disruptive behavior. We are not us. We are a client and a service provider. Are we clear? Ryan recoiled as if I'd slapped him. His hand slid off my desk. You can't be serious. You wouldn't actually call security on me. Try me, I countered. I've already documented Jade's trespass into the crew quarters. Don't think for a second I won't add your name to that report. The fire in his eyes died down, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He began to pace the small office, his movements frantic. He stopped by the window, staring out at the ocean, then turned back to me, his voice dropping to a low, investigative whisper. Have you talked to a lawyer, Natalie? I picked up my pen again, the gold nib catching the sunlight. I didn't answer. Natalie. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. I know how you work. You don't get this calm unless you've already made a move. Did you talk to someone in Miami? Have you filed anything? I looked him straight in the eye. You'll find out when you need to find out. The ambiguity hit him harder than a confession would have. He looked like a man standing on a trapdoor waiting for someone to pull the lever. He looked at the wedding ring on his finger. The one Jade had inadvertently photographed and shared with 15 million people. And then, he looked at my hand. My ring was gone, tucked away in the safe deposit box I'd secured in Task 4. I still love you, he said suddenly. The words felt rehearsed. A desperate attempt to use the old tools of manipulation that had worked for 4 years. He reached across the desk, trying to touch my hand. Everything with Jade. It was just a distraction. A mistake. I was stressed with the Savannah deal. And she was just there. But it's you. Nat. It's always been you. I pulled my hand back before he could make contact. I felt a wave of nausea. Not from heartbreak, but from the sheer audacity of his lie. Then you should have acted like it, I said. The words were short, sharp, and final. They cut through the air, leaving no room for rebuttal. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply looked back down at my paperwork, dismissing him from my reality. I treated him exactly like a line of text that needed to be edited out of a script. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. I could hear his heavy breathing, the sound of a man realizing that the person who used to be his greatest ally was now his most formidable opponent. He didn't know how to handle a Natalie who didn't care. Finally, the tension snapped. He turned, grabbed the door handle, and walked out. The door clicked shut. But this time, it sounded like a period at the end of a very long, very exhausting sentence. I kept writing. I forced my hand to move, to fill out the names, the cabin numbers, the times. But my hand, for the first time since Friday morning, was shaking. I put the pen down and gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't fear. It wasn't the lingering sparks of love. It was snorts, the crushing realization that I had just looked the man I married in the eyes and felt nothing but profound exhaustion. The man I had loved was a fiction I had helped write. The man standing in my office was a stranger. And a mediocre one at that. I took a deep breath. The salt air from the vents filling my lungs. I reached for the internal phone and dialed Camille. He just left, I said when she picked up. And? Camille asked, her voice tight with concern. And he's scared, I replied, watching the horizon line where the sea met the sky. He's finally starting to realize that the surprise I mentioned in Miami wasn't a gift. It was a funeral. I hung up. I had work to do. There were 400 guests who needed me. And only one who was beginning to realize he had lost everything before the ship even hit the halfway point of the voyage. He left. And I knew from the frantic, hunted look on his face that the unanswered question about the lawyer would drive him crazy. Every time a steward knocked on his door, every time a phone rang in his suite, he would wonder if it was the papers. He would spend the rest of this luxury cruise in a prison of his own making. Good. Let him. An hour after Ryan Harmon stormed out of my office, leaving the air heavy with his desperation and half-shaved bitterness, there was another knock on my door. This one was different, hesitant, light, and rhythmic. I didn't reach for my manager voice this time. I felt a strange intuition that the person on the other side wasn't there to demand a better wine selection or complain about a noisy neighbor. Come in, I said, folding the document I had been reviewing. The door opened to reveal Marcus, a 24-year-old room attendant I had personally trained 3 years ago. Usually, Marcus was the soul of the Deck 9 crew, always quick with a joke or a tip about the best spots to grab coffee in Nassau. But tonight he looked deeply uncomfortable. His shoulders were hunched and his hands were shoved deep into his uniform pockets. He didn't speak at first. He just stepped inside, checked the corridor behind him, and closed the door with a soft click. Mrs. Harmon, he began, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry to bother you after hours. I know you've had a difficult few days. Everyone on the ship knows. It's all right. Marcus, what's on your mind? Without a word, Marcus pulled his hands from his pockets and placed a thick fan of bills on my desk. They were crisp $100 bills. 5 of them. The orange glow of my desk lamp caught the security strips, making the money look like an ugly stain on the polished wood. A guest in Suite 1201 approached me in the service hallway 20 minutes ago, Marcus said, looking at the floor. The man from the real estate firm. Mr. Harmon. I didn't blink. I didn't even move my hands toward the money. I see. And what did Mr. Harmon want for $500? Marcus. He tried to play it off as a peace offering, Marcus said, a scoff escaping his lips. He handed me an envelope. It had a gold pendant inside and asked if I could sneak it into your cabin. But then he started asking questions. He wanted to know exactly when you finish your shifts. He wanted to know if you were seeing anyone privately on the ship. He asked me to find out your off-duty schedule for the rest of the week. Privately. That was the word he used. He said he just wanted to find the right moment to apologize without the crowd watching. I looked at the money, then up at Marcus. The young man looked indignant, his jaw set in a hard line. And you came straight to me, I noted. My mom always said if someone offers you money to hurt someone else or to betray their trust, that's not an opportunity. Marcus, that's a test. He looked me in the eye for the first time. I don't care how many zeros are on his bank statement. You've been good to us. Mrs. Harmon. You got my sister that internship at the corporate office. I'm not helping him hunt you. For the first time since boarding the Celestial Horizon, I felt a genuine warm smile spread across my face. It wasn't the practiced smile of a concierge manager. It was the smile of a woman who realized she wasn't as alone as she had felt. Your mom sounds like a very smart woman, Marcus. And she raised an even smarter son. What do you want me to do? Marcus asked, leaning forward. I can give the money back. I can report him to security for attempting to bribe crew members. I'll do whatever you say. I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning with the strategic possibilities. Ryan was panicking. He was drowning and trying to grab onto anything that felt like control. He wanted to know where I was so he could corner me, pressure me, or perhaps try to catch me in some perceived indiscretion to use as leverage in the divorce. No, I said, my voice quiet but sharp. Don't give it back and don't report him. Not yet. Marcus looked surprised. You want me to spy on you for him? In a way, I said, a cold spark of excitement igniting in my chest. I want you to go back to him. Tell him the pendant is in my room. Even though you'll keep it in the cruise safe for now. Accept the job. Tell him you'll be his eyes and ears. I don't understand. Marcus frowned. I want you to feed him exactly what I want him to hear. I explained. Starting tonight. I want you to tell him that I am exhausted. Tell him I had dinner alone in my cabin. Read a book for 20 minutes. And went to sleep at 9 p.m. Sharp. Every night. Without fail. Tell him I look broken down. Give him the version of me that makes him feel powerful. Marcus. Give him a target that isn't moving. Marcus's eyes widened and then a slow, mischievous grin spread across his face. He began to catch the rhythm of the game. So, he thinks he's got you right where he wants you, while you're actually doing something far more useful than sleeping. I finished. Yes. Marcus said, his voice brimming with newfound energy. He reached for the $500. Marcus. I stopped him. Keep the money. You didn't earn it by spying. You earned it by doing the right thing. Use it for your sister's tuition. Consider it a bonus from the Harmon estate. Marcus nodded, tucked the bills away, and stood taller. I'll give him the first report in an hour. 9 o'clock. Lights out. Perfect. After Marcus slipped out, I sat in the silence of my office for a few minutes. Ryan thought he was being clever. He thought he could buy his way into my private life, unaware that the people he looked down upon, the staff who made his bed and poured his drinks, were the very ones guarding my gates. I pulled out my laptop and initiated an encrypted video link. A few seconds later, the sharp, professional face of Diana Walsh appeared on the screen. The background of her office in Miami was dark, the city lights shimmering through the glass behind her. Natalie, Diana said, her voice crisp. I got the documents you scanned earlier. The additional hotel receipts from the Seattle trip he lied about. They are perfect. It establishes a pattern of financial deception, not just infidelity. Good, I said, glancing at the clock. It was 9:15 p.m. According to Marcus's report, I was currently fast asleep. I have more. I've secured a witness statement regarding his attempt to buy information from the crew. I'll send the digital file tonight. He's getting desperate, Diana noted, her eyes scanning the papers on her desk. That's when they make mistakes. We're in the home stretch. Natalie, these final pages, they close the loop. By the time this ship docks, he won't just be served with a divorce. He'll be facing a forensic audit of his business accounts. I found some irregularities in the joint filings that he thought I'd miss. Do it, I said, my voice devoid of hesitation. Close the chapter. Diana. We spent the next 2 hours going through the final logistics, while Ryan sat in his luxury suite feeling smug that he had a spy watching my door. I was systematically dismantling his future. I was taking back the 4 years he had stolen and converting them into a clean break. By 11:30 p.m. I ended the call. My eyes were tired, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. Ryan thought he was gathering intelligence. He thought he was the hunter. He had no idea that his most trusted asset had just become the architect of his downfall. But, as I prepared to finally get some real sleep, I felt a shift in the ship's energy. I didn't know yet that while I was securing my legal victory, Ryan was busy destroying his social one. The ocean was quiet, but the storm was already raging in the ship's bar. Cliffhanger. Ryan thought he was gathering intelligence. He had no idea that his spy had just become my most useful ally on this ship. But, what happened that same night at the bar? I only found out the next morning. And it was Camille who told me every word. The air in the crew galley at 6 o'clock in the morning was thick with the scent of burnt espresso and industrial strength cleaner. It was the only time the ship felt truly quiet. A brief hiatus before the 3,000 passengers above our heads woke up and began demanding their version of paradise. I was staring at the drip machine, watching the dark liquid pulse into the pot. When Camille found me, she didn't offer her usual morning quip or a complaint about the late-night shift at the Venetian bar. She walked in carrying 2 oversized mugs, her uniform slightly wrinkled, and an expression on her face that stopped the world for a second. It was the look of someone who had witnessed a car crash and was still trying to figure out how many vehicles were involved. She sat down at the small metal table, wrapping both hands around her mug as if she needed the heat to keep her steady. "You need to hear what happened at the bar last night," she said, her voice low and gravelly, "and you need to hear it from me before the ship's gossip mill turns it into a fairy tale." I sat across from her, my spine pressing against the cold chair. "Go on." "It was late," Camille began, her eyes focusing on a point somewhere past my shoulder. "Maybe half past midnight." The crowd had thinned out, but Ryan was still there. He'd moved from the booths to the bar rail. He was on his 3rd double whiskey. Neat. He wasn't loud. Not at first. But he had that look in his eye. The one where he's looking right through people. As Camille spoke, the sterile white lights of the galley seemed to fade, replaced by the amber glow and expensive mahogany of the Venetian bar. The ice clinked against the crystal glass as Ryan swirled his drink. He looked pathetic in his silk shirt, the top 3 buttons undone, staring at his own reflection in the mirrored backsplash of the bar. Jade was nowhere to be seen. She had reportedly retired to the suite early after another failed attempt to influence the crew. Ryan looked up at Camille, his focus blurry. He started talking like she wasn't even a person. "Of the furniture designed to listen. You know what my problem is?" Ryan muttered, his voice thick with alcohol and self-pity. "I had everything. A perfect wife. A perfect life. Natalie was the engine that kept the whole machine running. And I threw it all away. I traded a diamond for a piece of glass that doesn't even know my middle name." Camille polished a glass her face. A mask of professional indifference. "Is that so, Mr. Harmon? She calls me Ree." He laughed a bitter, hollow sound. "She loves the sweets. She loves the followers. But she doesn't know why I hate the sound of sirens or why I can't stand the smell of lilies." Natalie knew. Natalie knew everything. He didn't realize the bar was quieter than he thought. Snorts. He didn't see the booth in the far shadowed corner. He didn't see the 2 men who had been sitting there in silence for the last hour. Victor Harmon stood up first. His movements were slow, burdened by the weight of 70 years and a sudden sharp disappointment that seemed to age him another decade in seconds. He stepped out of the shadows, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him, Bill Foster rose as well. Bill didn't look angry. He looked disgusted. Ryan froze the glass halfway to his lips. "Dad, I didn't know you were clearly. You didn't think about much beyond yourself." Victor interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the authority of a man who had built an empire on a foundation of integrity. A foundation his son had just admitted to burning down. "For years, Ryan, your mother and I gave you everything. We welcomed Natalie into our hearts because we thought you were man enough to deserve her. And this is what you do. You sit in a public bar and mourn the perfect life you were too weak to protect." Ryan scrambled to stand, nearly knocking over his stool. "It's not what it looks like. I'm just stressed the Savannah project." "Don't," Bill Foster stepped forward, his voice like a sheet of ice cracking. "Ryan, I've sat across from you in boardrooms for 6 years. I've trusted your word on multi-million-dollar contracts because I thought I knew the kind of man you were. I thought you were a man of character." Bill paused, his eyes scanning Ryan's disheveled state. "I was wrong. If this is how you treat the woman you swore to protect, I can only imagine how you'll treat my capital when things get difficult." "Bill, let me explain. I've heard enough tonight," Bill said, turning his back on Ryan. "I'll have my office contact yours on Friday. We're done here." Victor didn't say another word. He just looked at his son, a long, searching look that ended in a slow shake of his head. He turned and walked out, his stride heavy but firm. Bill followed him, leaving Ryan standing alone in the center of the bar. the amber light making him look like a man drowning in a sea of gold. Camille took a long sip of her coffee, the silence in the kitchen returning. Victor walked out without another word. Bill stayed just long enough to finish his drink in silence, then left. 2. Ryan just sat there. He stayed until I had to close the bar at 2 a.m. He looked like he'd lost his soul. Nat. I looked down into my mug. The reflection of the fluorescent lights shimmered in the dark coffee. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't joy. It was the feeling of a clock finally striking midnight. Say something, Camille urged, leaning across the table. He lost Bill. He lost Victor. His world is collapsing in real time. He did all of this to himself. I said quietly. My voice was steady, clearer than it had been since the morning he lied to my face in Miami. He really did. Camille agreed. Good. I added. Camille looked at me, her brow furrowing. Good. That's all. After everything he's put you through. After Jade's story and the lies. You're just going to say good. Huh? What else is there to say? Camille. He sat at a bar on a ship with his mistress, got drunk, and told a bartender he'd thrown away a perfect life for someone who doesn't even know his middle name. I looked up, meeting her eyes. That's not my tragedy anymore. That's his. I spent 4 years carrying his secrets, his ego, and his mistakes. Last night, he took that weight off my shoulders and put it exactly where it belongs. I stood up, feeling a lightness that was almost dizzying. The connection was finally severed. Not by a lawyer, not by a document, but by the simple, brutal weight of the truth. I have a shift starting, I said, straightening my blazer. And I suspect I'll be seeing a very different Bill Foster today. You're a cold one, Natalie Harmon, Camille said, but there was a smirk of pride on her face. Not cold, I corrected as I reached the door. Just finished. I spent the rest of the morning in a blur of professional efficiency. But that afternoon, as the ship cut through the turquoise waters toward our next port, I took a moment to walk out onto the stern deck. I saw him immediately. Victor was standing alone by the railing, his hands gripped tight on the teak wood. It was the exact spot where I had stood 2 days ago, letting myself cry for 7 minutes before locking my emotions away. I stopped 10 feet away. Part of me wanted to go to him, to offer comfort, to tell him I was sorry for what his son had become. But I stayed back. Some grief needs space to breathe. Some realizations are too heavy to share. As I turned to leave, Victor looked up. Our eyes met across the deck. He didn't smile. And neither did I. But in that long, silent gaze, I understood everything. He wasn't just mourning a marriage. He was mourning the son he thought he had. And I was mourning the father-in-law I was about to lose. We were both grieving the same loss, just from different sides of the same shattered mirror. I nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of the truth we both now carried, and walked away. The 7 days were moving faster now, and for the first time, I wasn't just waiting for it to end. I was waiting for the beginning. Before I reveal the final truth that Natalie has been guarding for months. A secret that will completely shatter Ryan's world. Please comment with the word free below, so I know you're still here with me on this journey. Also, please note the following scenes include fictionalized elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. If these themes aren't what you're looking for, you may choose to exit the video here. But for those staying, prepare yourselves because everything is about to change. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. After 4 years of marriage, you know the sound of a person's walk as intimately as the sound of your own breathing. Ryan always placed his right foot slightly heavier than his left, a lingering habit from an old skiing injury he'd gotten in Aspen before I met him. On the plush carpets of our Miami apartment, it was a subtle thud. Here on the hard industrial flooring of the crew corridor on deck 7, it sounded like a slow, rhythmic funeral march. I was sitting on the edge of my narrow bunk, the fluorescent lights of my cabin turned off, leaving the room in a hazy blue twilight cast by the moon through the small porthole. The knock came 3 soft, hesitant raps, not the aggressive pounding of the man who had invaded my office 2 days ago. These were the knocks of a man who was unsure if he still existed. I stood up, straightened my uniform out of habit, and opened the door. The hallway was narrow, bathed in the dim amber glow of the night shift lighting. Ryan was leaning against the opposite bulkhead. He looked like a shadow of the man who had boarded this ship. The expensive blazer was gone, replaced by a simple black sweater. His face was grey, the skin tight over his cheekbones, and his eyes were hollowed out by an exhaustion that sleep wouldn't fix. There was no smell of whiskey on him this time, just the salt air and the heavy scent of regret. "I know I have no right to be here," he said. His snorts voice was a dry rasp, barely audible over the low, constant hum of the ship's engines and the muffled roar of the Atlantic against the hull. I stood in the doorway, my body a physical barrier between my private sanctuary and the man who had turned my life into a crime scene. I didn't invite him in. I didn't move an inch. "You're right. You don't." Ryan didn't argue. He didn't try to push past me. Snorts, he just slid down the bulkhead until he was half sitting, half leaning, his head thumping back against the metal wall. "I saw my father today." He looked at me like I was a stranger. Bill sent me a formal email. He didn't even have the decency to call. 8 years of partnership and I'm reduced to an automated cease and desist notification. "Is that why you're here, Ryan? To inventory your losses?" He looked up at me and for a split second I saw the man I had fallen in love with. The vulnerability that I used to mistake for depth. "No. I'm here because I'm a coward. I waited until I lost everything else to realize that losing you was the only thing that actually mattered." I stayed silent. I had learned over the last 4 days that silence was my most powerful weapon. It forced him to fill the void with his own guilt. "I'm sorry." He whispered the words trembling as they left his lips. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't change the fact that I brought her here. I know it doesn't erase the lies. But I need you to know I am genuinely deeply sorry. Not because I got caught. Not because of Bill or my father. But because I broke the only good thing I ever had." The silence that followed was agonizing. Outside, a rogue wave hit the side of the ship, sending a shudder through the floorboards. The hum of the engine seemed to grow louder, filling the space between us like a physical wall. Ryan looked at me, his eyes searching my face for a flicker of anger. A tear. A sign of the woman who used to stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning waiting for him to come home. "Yell at me, Natalie." He pleaded, his voice cracking. "Cry. Throw something. Slam the door in my face. Do anything. This silence is what?" I asked, my voice as steady as the horizon line. "It's terrifying." He choked out. "It's like talking to a ghost. It's like you're already gone." I stepped out of the cabin just an inch into the dim light of the corridor. I looked down at him. The man who had occupied every corner of my heart for 4 years. The man I had planned to surprise with my promotion. The man I thought I knew better than anyone. I already knew. "Ryan," I said. The words were quiet, almost gentle, but they carried the weight of 1,000 midnights. Ryan's entire body went rigid. He blinked, his brow furrowing as he tried to process the sentence. "What?" "I've known about Jade for 3 months," I said, leaning my shoulder against the doorframe. I didn't feel the need to raise my voice. The truth didn't need volume to be lethal. I knew about the hotel receipts. I knew about the late nights at the office that were actually dinners at the Rusty Pelican. I knew about the jewelry you bought her on our anniversary. I knew everything. "Ryan." He looked like he'd been struck. The air seemed to leave his lungs in one long shaky exhale. 3 months. You stayed. You acted like everything was fine. "I didn't stay because I was waiting for you to change," I said, looking him straight in the eyes, making sure he saw the absolute lack of flickering hope in mine. "I stayed to make sure I was ready. I wanted you to know that I know. And I wanted you to see that by the time you decided to be honest, I had already stopped caring." Ryan reached out, his hand hovering near my hem, not quite touching me. "Nat, please. Good night." "Ryan," I said. I backed into my cabin and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a dramatic ending. I closed it with the soft, deliberate click of a lock being engaged, a sound that signaled the end of an era. I leaned my back against the cold metal of the door. My heart wasn't racing. My eyes weren't burning with tears. Instead, I felt a strange hollow sensation of peace. I stood there for a long time listening. For a few minutes there was no sound from the other side. Then finally, I heard the footsteps again. This time they weren't rhythmic. They were staccato, uneven, the sound of a man stumbling through the dark. I listened until the sound faded, completely swallowed by the vast indifferent groan of the ship. I had spent 4 years making a home for that man. I had spent 1,000 nights worrying about his stress, his health, his happiness, and in one sentence, I had taken it all back. Buambo. Letting go even when it is the only path to survival takes everything you have. It is a slow bleeding out of the life you thought you were living. But as I finally moved to my bunk and watched the moonlight dance on the ceiling, I realized that for the first time in 3 months, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The shoe had dropped and it had crushed him, not me. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I didn't know then that Camille would tell me the next morning how Ryan hadn't been seen at breakfast or lunch. I didn't know that Suite 1201 had become a silent tomb save for a frantic 2 a.m. room service order of enough alcohol to numb a horse. Whatever I had said, it had landed exactly where I intended, in the center of his conscience like a slow-acting poison. But as the sun began to rise over the Caribbean, I knew this wasn't the end. The 7 days were nearing their conclusion and a cornered man and an increasingly desperate influencer were about to make their final stands. I was ready. I had been ready for 3 months. I learned about Jade's next move the way I'd been learning about most things on this ship from someone who had no reason to help me, but did anyway. On a vessel like the Celestial Horizon, information is a currency more valuable than the chips at the high-stakes poker tables on Deck 6. And for the last 5 days, I had unknowingly been accumulating a massive fortune in goodwill. Wednesday morning was overcast, the Caribbean sky a bruised purple that matched my mood as I walked toward the administrative wing. I was tired, but it was a sharp, functional kind of exhaustion. My conversation with Ryan in the corridor the night before had closed a door in my mind, and I found that without the constant weight of his lies, I could move much faster. I hadn't even reached my desk when the internal line on the wall began to pulse with a steady red light. I picked it up before the first ring finished. Natalie Harmon, I said. My office. Now. Director Caldwell's voice was clipped, stripped of its usual professional warmth. I didn't hesitate. I walked down the hall, straightened my blazer and entered her office. Caldwell was staring at a secondary monitor on her desk, her brow furrowed in a deep permanent line of frustration. She didn't invite me to sit. Natalie, I just had a second formal complaint filed by the guest in Suite 1201. She began turning the monitor toward me. This time she didn't just go to the desk. She bypassed the ship's hierarchy and sent a direct legal threat to our Miami headquarters. She is demanding you be reassigned to a different vessel immediately, citing an untenable and hostile environment that is causing her extreme emotional distress. I looked at the screen. It was a formal letter drafted with the kind of aggressive vocabulary only a high-priced influencer's legal team can manage. Words like intentional infliction of emotional distress and breach of guest contract jumped out in bold. I have documentation for every interaction, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I have Officer Morrison's security footage from the crew quarters, my own written logs of every service request and time-stamped audio from the boarding gate. I'd like to formally submit the full file to the Miami legal team today. Caldwell leaned back, letting out a long, weary sigh. I've already reviewed them, Natalie. And so has Miami. The complaint is dismissed. We've informed her representatives that Azure Crown does not move senior management based on the personal whims of guests, especially when the staff member in question has a flawless service record. She paused, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. But that's not all. She also contacted our social media and PR department. She wanted the viral video of your welcome at the gangway taken down. She claimed it was a violation of her privacy and was demanding we issue a public apology on her behalf. And we told her the truth. Caldwell replied, a ghost of a smirk playing on her lips. All footage captured on Azure Crown property, including the gangway, is the legal property of the cruise line. She signed that waiver the moment she clicked accept on her ticket. She has no grounds to remove it, and quite frankly, our PR team is enjoying the engagement metrics. The video it stays. Caldwell's expression then softened, a rare moment of genuine empathy breaking through her corporate exterior. Natalie, this woman is systematically trying to end your career. She's not just looking for a refund or an apology. She wants you gone. I know. I said quietly. And you're not worried? You don't look like a woman who is about to lose everything. I've already lost the things that were meant to be lost. I replied, meeting her gaze. The rest? I've been preparing for this for a long time. Good. Because the board is watching. Don't give her an inch. I left her office feeling a strange sense of vindication. Jade was flailing. She was used to a world where a loud enough post or a sharp enough threat could make people bend. She didn't understand that on this ship I was part of the machinery. I was the one who made the gears turn. An hour later I was back in my office when a soft knock sounded at the door. I expected Camille or perhaps another messenger from Caldwell. Instead, the door opened to reveal Anna Petrova. Anna was a quiet woman in her mid-40s, the head of the ship's digital archive and photography department. We had worked together for years, but we weren't close. We were the kind of colleagues who exchanged nods in the galley and nothing more. Mrs. Harmon, Anna said, her voice low. She didn't come in all the way. She just reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. I need to give you something. I looked at the drive, then at her. Anna, what is this? I heard about the complaints from Deck 9. Anna said, her eyes glancing toward the door. And I saw what happened at the boarding gate. I'm the one who manages the high-resolution archives for the VIP deck. I've compiled everything from boarding day. Every moment. Every angle. Time-stamped. Full resolution. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cold metal of the drive. Anna, you could get into trouble for releasing raw archives without a court order. No. Anna said, her voice firm. These are ship's archives, and as a manager you have a right to review footage involving guest disputes. I'm just making sure the files don't get accidentally deleted if Mr. Harmon's legal team starts throwing money around. His people tried to contact the PR office this morning to buy the rights to the footage. They were turned away. But I didn't want to take any chances. I looked at the small silver stick in my hand, a lump forming in my throat. You didn't have to do this. Anna. We barely talk. Anna paused, a small sad smile touching her face. Last year. The scheduling conflict. My daughter was graduating back in Bulgaria and the previous manager wouldn't let me take my leave. You went to Director Caldwell for me. You didn't even know me. But you told her that a mother's place was at her daughter's graduation. You took over my shifts for 3 days so I could fly home. I remembered then. It had seemed like such a small thing at the time. A simple act of fairness. You didn't have to do that. Either. Anna whispered. But you did. So today I do this. I felt my eyes prickle with a heat I hadn't allowed myself to feel in days. Thank you. Anna. Don't thank me. She said. Her hand on the doorknob. Just when Natalie, people like that. They think we are invisible. Show them that we aren't. She slipped out as quietly as she had arrived. I sat there for a moment. The USB drive clutched in my hand. I realized then that I wasn't fighting this war alone. I had an army of invisible people. Marcus, Camille, Anna, who were standing in the shadows holding the line for me. I pulled out a business card from my desk drawer. Diana Walsh's private line. I plugged the USB into my laptop and watched as hundreds of files populated the screen. Clear. Undeniable evidence of Ryan's deception and Jade's aggression captured in 4K resolution. I hit send. By that evening I received a short encrypted message from Diana. Files received. Anna's archive is the smoking gun. Natalie. Every hotel check-in. Every gangway interaction. It's all here. Everything is in order. You're protected. He can't fight the filing now. Sleep well. I read that message 3 times. The blue light of the phone illuminating the dark cabin. I felt a profound sense of relief. But also a growing anticipation. The pieces were all on the board. The truth was secure. I put my phone away and stood by the porthole watching the white foam of the ship's wake disappear into the night. We had one more full day at sea. One more night of formal gowns, champagne, and forced smiles. I had a feeling that tomorrow's gala would be the most important night of my life. Not because of the award I was supposed to receive, but because it would be the first time I would stand in a room full of people and know with absolute certainty that I had already won. The grand ballroom of the celestial horizon could seat 400 people, and on the final night at sea every single seat was filled. The room was a sea of black tuxedos, shimmering silk gowns, and the clinking of crystal flutes filled with vintage champagne. Above us, the massive crystal chandeliers swayed gently with the ship's rhythmic movement, casting thousands of tiny, dancing diamonds across the gilded walls. I was at the back of the room, standing near the mahogany service station. My white azure crown uniform was pressed to a razor's edge, my hair pulled back into a sleek, professional bun. To the guests, I was just the concierge manager, ensuring the evening ran without a hitch. I was checking the dessert courses, shooing whispering instructions to the head waiter about table 14's dietary restrictions, and keeping a watchful eye on the wine service. I had absolutely no idea what Captain Rodriguez was about to do. In the far corner of the room, tucked away in the shadows of a velvet-draped pillar, sat Ryan and Jade. It was the first time they had been seen together in public for days. Ryan looked like a man being marched to a scaffold. His tuxedo, though perfectly tailored, seemed to hang heavy on his frame. Jade was draped in a crimson dress that screamed for attention, but her usual influencer glow was replaced by a taut, brittle mask of defensive pride. They weren't speaking. They were two people stranded on an island of their own making, surrounded by 400 people who had spent the week watching their scandal go viral. The orchestra finished a sweeping rendition of a jazz classic and the room dimmed. A single spotlight hit the podium as Captain Rodriguez stepped up, his navy blue dress uniform decorated with gold braid that caught the light. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." The captain's voice boomed, rich and steady. "As we approach the end of this magnificent voyage, it is our tradition to recognize an individual who embodies the spirit of Azure Crown. This voyage in particular has presented unique challenges." I felt a slight prickle at the back of my neck. I kept my head down, adjusting a silver tray. "This individual," Rodriguez continued, his gaze scanning the room until it landed squarely on me at the back, "has demonstrated not only outstanding professional excellence, but a level of grace under pressure that has inspired every person on this vessel. In the face of adversity, they chose silence over clamor and duty over distraction." The applause began as a low murmur. "It is my distinct honor to present the Azure Crown Excellence Award to our senior concierge manager, Mrs. Natalie Harmon." For a second the world stopped spinning. The sound of the engines, the murmur of the crowd, even my own heartbeat seemed to vanish. Then the spotlight swung away from the captain and blinded me. The room erupted. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. But then, in the center of the room, I saw a figure rise. Victor Harmon stood up. He didn't just stand. He rose with a slow, deliberate dignity that commanded attention. He was the first person in the entire ballroom to get to his feet. Beside him, Eleanor rose as well, her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Then Bill Foster stood. Then the guests at the surrounding tables. Within seconds, 400 people were on their feet, the roar of their applause filling the vaulted ceiling like a tidal wave. I walked toward the stage. My feet felt light. My head held high. I didn't look at the corner pillar. I didn't look at the shadows. I looked at the captain and I looked at Victor, whose proud nod felt like the greatest gift I had ever received. As I took the heavy gold trophy from the captain's hand, the room fell quiet. I stepped up to the microphone. I didn't have a prepared speech, but the words came from a place of absolute clarity. "Thank you," I said, my voice echoing through the ballroom, steady and clear. "This voyage has reminded me of something I almost forgot. Our greatest strength is not in how loudly we speak. It is not in the stories we tell the world or the images we project. Our strength lies in how clearly we act when the world is watching. It lies in the integrity of our work and the quiet choices we make when things are difficult." Thank you for being a part of my journey. I stepped down to a second standing ovation. But as I passed the shadows on my way back, I heard the sharp, whispered hiss of reality. Are you kidding me right now? Jade's voice was a jagged blade cutting through the celebratory atmosphere. She was staring at Ryan, her face contorted with a mixture of jealousy and disbelief. They're giving her an award after everything. Ryan, do something. Say something. Ryan didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on me, pinned to the side of me under the lights. The man who had spent 3 months trying to make me feel small was now watching me occupy the entire room. Ryan, Jade hissed, her hand gripping his arm so hard her knuckles were white. Talk to me. She's magnificent. Ryan whispered. It wasn't a compliment meant for me to hear. It was a realization that seemed to break him. It was the sound of a man finally seeing the value of the treasure he had thrown away only after it was locked in someone else's vault. Excuse me? Jade's voice went cold, a dangerous edge creeping in. What did you just say? Ryan didn't even blink. He continued to watch me as I shook hands with the guests. I said she's magnificent and I was a fool. Jade's eyes flashed with a lethal icy light. She let go of his arm as if he had burned her. The war between them had officially begun and I wasn't even a participant in it anymore. I was the prize they had both lost. I didn't look for him in the crowd as I made my way to the exit. I didn't need to. I didn't need his regret, his admiration or his apology. I just held the award against my chest and felt, for the first time in days, completely and utterly myself. The Mrs. Harmon on the trophy didn't feel like a tie to him. It felt like a title I had earned and would soon outgrow. As I reached the grand doors leading out to the corridor, I felt a hand on my arm. I turned to find Victor. Eleanor was standing a few feet back giving us a moment. Victor didn't say a word. He couldn't. His throat moved as he swallowed back his emotion. He simply took my hand in both of his and squeezed it a firm, fatherly grip that spoke of 1,000 things he couldn't put into sentences. He was telling me he was proud. He was telling me he knew the truth. He was telling me that even when the legal papers were served tomorrow, I would always be his daughter in the ways that mattered. I didn't cry, but it was close. The heat in my chest was almost overwhelming. I squeezed his hand back. A silent promise that I would be okay. One more night. Natalie, he whispered, his voice thick. One more night. Victor, I replied. He nodded, patted my hand and turned back to Eleanor. I stepped out into the quiet of the hallway, the distant sound of the gala's music fading behind the heavy doors. I had one more night. And as I looked down at the gold award in my hand, I knew the cliffhanger wasn't about whether I would survive. It was about how much more of the truth was going to come out before we reached the docks of Miami. Ryan was broken. Jade was humiliated and vengeful and I was finally truly free. But I knew Ryan wasn't finished and Jade's silence was the most dangerous thing she had left. Tomorrow the ship would dock. Tomorrow the life I knew would end and I couldn't wait for the sun to rise. The last night at sea is always the strangest. Passengers pack their bags with a frantic sort of nostalgia trying to hold on to something. The ocean air. The freedom. The version of themselves they were for 7 days. I was trying to hold on. To. But to different things. Before I could find my quiet corner on the ship, I had 2 more conversations to survive. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the impending reality of the mainland. I was walking through the Deck 9 corridor, the golden light of the gala still flickering in my mind, when a shadow detached itself from a sweet alcove. It was Jade. She wasn't wearing her influencer smile anymore. Her crimson dress was gone, replaced by a white suit that looked like a jagged piece of ice. She blocked my path. Her eyes narrowed into lethal slits. Congratulations on your little award. She spat, her voice a venomous hiss. I stopped keeping my hands steady at my sides. Thank you. Jade, is there something I can help you with? You think you won something tonight? She took a step closer, her breath smelling of expensive wine and desperation. Ryan is going to fight this divorce. He told me. He has lawyers that would eat your little Miami attorney for breakfast. He'll drag this out for years. You'll lose the apartment, the joint accounts, the reputation. You'll be left with that gold trophy and nothing else. I looked at her and for the first time I felt a wave of genuine pity. Are you done? I'm just getting started. You want to play the dignified victim? Fine. But when the settlement is over and you're left with nothing, Jade. I interrupted, my voice hitting a level of calm that seemed to unnerve her. Can I tell you something? In 6 months, maybe less, Ryan is going to do to you exactly what he did to me. Not because he's evil, but because he doesn't know how to be honest with anyone, including himself. And when that day comes, I hope you remember this conversation. Jade opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time she was speechless. I walked past her without looking back. I could hear her silence behind me. The sound of a woman realizing she was just a temporary distraction in a much larger tragedy. I climbed the stairs to the stern deck. The Caribbean sky was a vast obsidian vault spilled with stars. The wind was stronger here, carrying the roar of the wake. I figured I'd find you here, a voice said from the shadows. It was Ryan. He was standing by the railing staring at the white foam. He looked hollowed out. No whiskey, no anger, just a man looking at the debris of his own life. It's the last night, I said, joining him but keeping my distance. I always come up here on the last night. Bill pulled the contract. Ryan said quietly, $8 million. Gone. I heard. My father hasn't spoken to me in 4 days. He let out a dry, rattling breath. I've lost everything. Haven't I? You still have your health, Ryan, your fam, your future. But not you, he said, finally looking at me. His eyes were wet. No, not me. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the sound of the Atlantic hitting the hull. Is there anything I can do? Ryan asked, his voice breaking. To fix it? I looked at him and for the first time I allowed the sadness to show. You know what the saddest part is? I was going to surprise you with this promotion. I spent weeks imagining your face when I told you. I was so proud. Ryan, I wanted to share it with you. Ryan's head dropped, his shoulders shaking. But you were already somewhere else. I continued. You had been somewhere else for a long time. I just didn't want to see it. Nat. My attorney filed the petition Thursday morning before we even sailed. Diana Walsh. You met her 3 years ago. She'll have your copy ready when you step off that gangway tomorrow. Ryan's voice was a whisper. Just like that. I turned to look at him one last time. It was never just like that. Ryan. It was 4 years of my life and I loved every one of them. I walked away. I didn't look back. Not Natalie monologue. I stood with my back against my cabin door for a long time. Not because I was falling apart, but because I was finally completely letting go. And letting go, even when it's the right thing, takes everything you have. The sun would rise in a few hours. Miami was waiting. I could almost feel the heat of the city and the weight of the legal papers in Diana's hand. Jade, snorts, was vengeful. Ryan was broken. And I was finally free. Tomorrow I would walk off this ship into a life that was entirely, completely mine. For the first time in 4 years. I couldn't wait to find out what that was. Miami emerged before our eyes. Slowly first as a distant glow on the horizon. Then as a sharp silhouette of skyscrapers. And finally as a city full of noise, heat and life. I stood on the upper deck watching the skyline grow larger and more defined with every pulse of the engines. The morning sun was a brilliant, unforgiving gold reflecting off the glass towers of downtown. My bags were packed. My handover paperwork for the relief manager was signed and sealed. I was ready. The celestial horizon gave one final deep blast of its whistle. A sound that vibrated in my very bones. It felt like a signal not just for the end of a voyage, but for the end of a 4-year sentence I had been serving without even knowing it. Camille stepped up beside me, leaning her elbows on the railing. She looked tired, but there was a spark of triumph in her eyes. Ready? She asked, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. More than I've ever been. I replied, adjusting the collar of my uniform one last time. 7 days. Nat. Camille shook her head looking at the bustling dock below. You did it. Most people would have jumped overboard by day 3. You walked through fire and didn't even singe your sleeves. We did it. Camille. I couldn't have navigated this without you. I looked at her. A silent promise of a friendship that would outlast this ship. Let's go. Life is waiting. We moved through the disembarkation process with the practiced efficiency of veterans. I completed my final duty, handing over the master keys to the incoming manager with a steady hand. As I walked down the gangway, the humid Miami air hit me like a physical weight. But it didn't feel oppressive. It felt real. At the foot of the pier, standing near a black sedan, was Diana Walsh. She looked exactly as she did in the boardroom. Sharp, impeccable, and utterly lethal. She held a thick manila envelope in her hand like a soldier holds a weapon. The petition was filed Thursday morning exactly as we discussed, Diana said, her eyes tracking the passengers streaming off the ship. The process server is positioned at the exit of the customs hall. Ryan will be formally served the moment he clears the gangway and steps onto public property. How long until it's final? I asked, looking at the envelope. Florida has a 20-day waiting period, Diana explained. Then a hearing. With the digital archives, Anna provided the timestamps of the suite entries and the financial irregularities we flagged. I'd estimate 60 to 90 days total for a final judgment. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. Natalie, you're protected. That's fine, I said, a sense of profound peace washing over me. I have time. Movement in the crowd caught my eye. Victor and Eleanor were walking toward us. They looked weary. The glamour of the cruise replaced by the heavy reality of their son's failure. Eleanor stepped forward and pulled me into a fierce, trembling hug. You are the best thing that ever came into this family. Eleanor whispered into my ear, her voice breaking. I am so sorry, sweetheart, for everything. Thank you, Eleanor, I said, holding her back. I looked at Victor, who stood behind her, his expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. Please, take care of him. He's going to need you more than he knows. Victor nodded once. A silent agreement between two people who had loved the same person and been equally betrayed by him. As they moved toward their car, Bill Foster approached. He didn't look at the ship. He looked at me. He extended a hand, his grip firm and professional. Mrs. Harmon, if you ever consider a different direction, perhaps something in corporate strategy or luxury asset management, as your crown isn't the only company that values exceptional people. My firm is always looking for someone who can keep their head when everyone else is losing theirs. I smiled. A small, genuine flick of my lips. I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Foster. Thank you. Then I saw him. Ryan stepped off the gangway, Jade clinging to his arm. She was hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses, her head down trying to avoid the lingering gazes of the passengers who recognized her from the viral video. Ryan looked like a man walking toward a cliff. He looked around, his eyes searching the crowd until they landed on me. Before he could take a step in my direction, a man in a plain grey suit intercepted him. Ryan Harmon, the man asked. Yes. Ryan started, his voice confused. You've been served, the process server said, thrusting a white envelope into Ryan's hand. The world seemed to freeze. Ryan stared at the envelope as if it were an explosive. He looked up, his eyes darting from the papers to Diana Walsh and finally to me. I stood my ground, 20 feet away, framed by the bright Florida sun. I didn't scowl. I didn't smirk. I didn't look back at him with longing. I simply watched him realize that the Wednesday morning he lied to my face was the day he lost everything. At that exact moment, Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled with the envelope, nearly dropping it as he pulled out his device. I knew what it was. Bill Foster had told me he was sending it. The message on his screen was brief. Ryan, after careful consideration, Foster Group will not be renewing our contract. I wish you well. I turned my back on him. I didn't need to see his face fall. I didn't need to hear Jade's inevitable scream of frustration. I walked away from the celestial horizon. The sound of my heels on the concrete pavement a steady, confident beat. Behind me was 7 days of calculated silence. 4 years of a hollow marriage. And a version of my life I had already said goodbye to somewhere between the stars and the Caribbean Sea. I was leaving the ghost of Natalie Harmon on that ship. Ahead of me was the city, the heat, and a vast, empty calendar. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of the silence. I was hungry for it. I was ready to find out who I was when I wasn't busy being a perfect wife to a lying man. I didn't look back. I just kept walking toward the light. Looking back at the wreckage of my marriage, I realized that God doesn't always stop the storm. Sometimes He just gives you the strength to swim through it. My journey through this family revenge was never about spite, but about reclaiming a soul I almost lost to a 4-year lie. Don't be like me. Don't wait 3 months ignoring the cold truth of a family betrayal while trying to fix a man who was already broken. My personal view: silence isn't weakness. It's a tactical retreat. If you suspect a family betrayal, don't scream. Prepare. This family revenge taught me that integrity is the only currency that matters when your world collapses. Facing a family betrayal is agonizing. But surviving this family revenge proved that a clean ending is better than a haunted beginning. Future stories contain fictionalized elements designed for educational purposes. If these themes are not for you, please choose content better suited to your journey. If Natalie's strength inspired you, please drop a comment, share this story, and subscribe to our channel for more sophisticated dramas. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Thanks for your time today. I'll see you again in the next story.